Here in the UK, when you first start school and you have your first history lesson, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be taught about the Battle of Hastings, 1066, King Harold, William the Conqueror, and all that malarkey. However, when you get a little bit older, you're taught about a more bloody era of British history. Hello, welcome back to the Adrian Project. I'm Adrian with a face for radio, and on today's episode, I'm going to be doing a plain talking review of the TV series, The Tudors. So, cue the music. Golden Globe award-winning Jonathan Rhys-Meyers gives the performance of a lifetime as England's most notorious king in the thrilling hit drama series The Tudors. King Henry VIII's fierce passion to secure England's world prominence and his own legacy leads him through a string of 6 wives, an ill-advised war with France, and ultimately a place in history as the world's most charismatic, most brutal, and most deeply human king. So, the box set of The Tudors covers all 4 series, and the quality of actors on show in this series was totally mind-blowing. Of course, you've got Jonathan Rhys-Meyers playing King Henry, but you've also got actors of such calibre as, I'm going to have to read this because there's so many, Sam Neill, Henry Cavill, who went on, as you know, to play Superman, Peter O'Toole, Jolie Richardson, James Frayne, Sarah Bolger, who hardly ever gets a mention in this but was absolutely brilliant as Princess Mary, Anita Bryant, Annabelle Wallis, the awesome Jeremy Northam, Tamsin Merchant, and my favourite character in this whole series, Anthony Brophy, who plays Chapuis, the Spanish ambassador. Absolutely fantastic cast list. To have that cast list in a film cost absolute millions. So for them to have this on a TV series is just mind-blowing. So right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to break it down best I can, revolving around the series and what wives came along in this series. Because one of the things about this, there is so much to talk about. I could make 6-7 videos about this series just on its own, and they'd be well over an hour long. One of the things that does stick out for me, because I am a bit of a history fan, I love history, is that there are some historical inaccuracies in this. One that jumps out for people that know the history around the Tudor period is dealing with his illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy. Now, in real life, Henry Fitzroy died when he was 17 and he was actually married. In this programme, they show you Henry Fitzroy in his deathbed, and he looks no older than 5 years old, if not younger. So that is playing a bit fast and loose with the facts. You know, it's there to make an entertaining show. There's a couple of glaring omissions in this for me as well. It never gets mentioned about Catherine of Aragon, how she led and repelled an attack from the north while King Henry was over in France, being a bit of a naughty lad. Nothing about that. You know, she saved, quite literally saved his kingdom for him, and nothing. It's not even touched upon in this programme. And another glaring omission for me, something that just get mentioned, blinking you'll miss it, is the whole Mary Rose. This was the biggest warship that had ever been built at the time. Of course, it was far too heavily laden with cannon and goods and whatever, and it sank before it even got out of port, didn't it? That on its maiden voyage, and that's not touched upon either. But they're just little minor grievances for me. So let's jump on board as we look and talk about series 1 and 2 of the Tudors. As the introduction at the beginning of the video states, there's more to the story of Henry VIII and his 6 wives than you think. Series 1 and 2 mainly revolve around the 2 women in his life at the time. Queen Catherine, played by the criminally underrated Maria Doyle Kennedy, and you've got Anne Boleyn, played by the awesome Natalie Dormer. So, as I say, this is the story that you'll probably know more of than the later part of Henry's life. The whole marriage to Queen Catherine, having an illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, and then having his little head doing all his thinking for him when he comes to see Anne Boleyn in court and is totally enamoured with her. This carries on where he wants to, absolutely desperate to get divorced so he could marry Anne Boleyn. Mainly, I think a lot of that was to do with Catherine's inability to give him a son, which a little unfair really, because she had many miscarriages. She did give him a daughter, Princess Mary. I think it was a bit of a shit really myself for doing that on her. But this is a story and this is how it goes, this is history. And series 1 will go into his whole chasing of Anne Boleyn, who, let's say, wasn't eager by any means. I think she was pushed into it more with the Boleyn family, who were scheming ladder climbers. They're the ones that really pushed her into it. But so what she said was, if you want, I'm not going to be a mistress. If you want to be with me, you've got to divorce Catherine. So that is what this whole program, this whole series 1 revolves around. Any normal bloke, your little head thinking, and you have an affair, it's a falling out with the missus and it's falling out with families and whatever. When a king does it, we're talking about falling out between entire countries and religions. This is when he starts to question the validity of being married to Catherine, of course. All this revolves around religion, whether what the Catholic ideals was. They wouldn't let him divorce, and all this is covered in the first series. Of course, as well, we've got falling outs with France and with Spain. We always seem to be teetering on the edge of war, which in a way Henry wanted, because he wanted to be like his predecessors. He wanted to go down in history to be the one to conquer Europe, like his ancestors had done at Agincourt. I think Henry V, wasn't it, Agincourt, and that he wanted a piece of that action as well. But of course, we've got simmering in the background. He's chasing around like a dog chasing his tail with Anne Boleyn. It's fantastically written. The cinematography is awesome. The cast, you're not going to get a better cast, I don't think. And series 1 and series 2 are possibly the best television you're ever going to see. Talking series 2, This is where we're coming into the marriage to Anne Boleyn. He finds a way in his mind around it all, which does mean breaking with the Catholic faith, which doesn't go down well with the populace because they all love Catherine, they're all devout Catholics. But as you find out what the king wants, the king usually gets, and he will do anything in his means to get it, and woe betide you if you're told to do something and you don't do it. Let's just say I wouldn't have wanted to be in the court of King Henry. So, of course, he finally gets into season 2. We do get marriage of Henry to Anne. She's promised him sons and gives him a daughter, which sort of sets him off again. It's like, well, okay, it's a daughter, still young, we can have sons. The daughter being, of course, Elizabeth, and we know Elizabeth went on to be the second longest reigning monarch, I think, or she the third. Did she? I can't remember. Oh, there's a bugger. I can't remember if she reigned longer than Victoria. I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments below. But yeah, finally get to marry Anne Boleyn, gives him a daughter instead of a son, and that sort of puts his little head's thinking cap back on again. And of course, he's back on the prowl. And this is when his eyes land on Lady Jane Seymour. And once again, we know what Henry's like. He's totally head over heels in love with Jane Seymour without actually knowing her. So, of course, that sets the whole wheels in motion, where he's now saying that he was ill-advised and he shouldn't have married Anne Boleyn. It's all wrong. And they wanted to find out even the smallest detail of why he shouldn't have married Anne Boleyn. And of course, there's a lot of trumped up charges that sort of come out of the woodwork and seal the fate of Anne Boleyn. And of course, that takes us up to the end of the second series, sort of on a knife edge. Poor choice of words when you're going to have your head chopped off, isn't it? But that's where we get to at that. Again, second series, absolutely fantastic. Like I said, series 1, series 2 is probably some of the best television you're ever going to see. Fantastically written. The story is just so rich. These 2 series could have very, very easily been stretched out to another 2 series. There's a lot of things that they'll have missed and they could have covered in this, but of course you've got to get it into a 50-minute time frame, and they can only give you so many episodes in the series, which is, it is what it is. But like I say, absolutely awesome series. So that will move us on now to series 3. At the end of season 2, you have Henry's third wife, Jane Seymour, played by Anita Bryan. But at the beginning of the third series, she is played by Annabelle Wallis. The reason for that being nothing more than a clash of filming schedules. Anita Bryan was still filming Journey to the Centre of the Earth when filming started on the Tudors, so they just replaced her with Annabelle Wallis. It's nothing more sinister than that. Okay, series 3 for me, I think, starts off with the life of Henry, where that's when people's interest either waned on it or they just don't know a lot of it. And because of that, I think they could have done a lot more in this series. It's the shorter of the 4 series. Series 1 and 2 both had 10 episodes, as did series 4. This one has only got series 8. And I don't think it's because of lack of material, but you see, I think they could have done a lot more with it. Still brilliant, still well acted, well written, but it's not got the same impact as what the first 2 series have. It starts off, of course, Anne Boleyn has been executed, which leaves Henry open to marry Jane Seymour, which he does, and unfortunately it was short-lived because she died not long after giving birth to his son. This all happened around the same time as there was an uprising in England where the Catholics decided they'd had enough of, closing all the monasteries and getting rid of all of the Catholic faith and all that. They'd had enough of it and they wanted to rebel. So you get more of that storyline, I think, in this series than what you do of the Jane Seymour storyline. Of course, after she dies, he went into a deep depression, which I think for a good couple of years, thinking back to it, from what I remember. In the series, it was as though he was only away for a couple of weeks, but no, he was away for a long time. And of course, with him not being there, without the strong figurehead that he was, you got the Seymours arguing with Cromwell and the rest of them, were all vying for power and not really getting anything done. Trying to crush and quell this uprising, and it wasn't really sorted out till Henry sort of got himself back into public life again. I say it's really part of the history that a lot of people don't know about, and I think it could have been done a lot better. Of course, that's the first two episodes of being married to Jane. A couple of episodes after that with his depression, and then of course the two episodes after that, episodes say 6, 7, and 8, are all based around who he was going to marry next, because he was still wanted to make sure that he had a male heir, and he really needed to be married. He had got his sights set on the Spanish, the King of Spain's daughter. He really wanted to do that, but Cromwell, with his manipulative little ways, he decided, no, you shouldn't be going that route. You should be doing having relations with one of the daughters of the ruler of Cleves. Of course, we all know that is going to be Anne of Cleves. And I think it was a lot of Tudor propaganda at the point there, a lot of pro-king propaganda as well, where it was actually said that she wasn't the best looking woman on the planet. And who did they get to play the woman King Henry famously called the Flanders Mare? Joss Stone. I mean, Joss Stone. I think it's with this that Jonathan Rhys-Meyers shows what a fantastic actor he is, because to stand in front of Joss Stone and say she's got a face like a horse and then stomp off and look like he means it is absolutely brilliant. Of course, in the real world, I think it was a lot to do again with propaganda, because let's not forget when Anne Boleyn had fell out of favour with him, the propaganda mill was, releasing stories, ludicrous stories about her. One of the most famous ones being that she had 6 fingers on her left hand, which was absolute nonsense. It was absolute rubbish. And here again, I think it was more of a case of Henry didn't get what he wanted, and he felt like he was pressured into marrying Anne of Cleves, and he just wasn't happy about it. He got a bit of a strop on about it. Of course, this was another very short-lived marriage, and it went to the point where he pressed Cromwell to get this marriage annulled as well, and take that off to her. She was very gracious about it all, Anne of Cleves as well, because This was around the time when Henry was starting to pile on the pounds, shall we say. He'd had that recurring injury on his leg, which meant he weren't as mobile as he was, and he was becoming quite literally the lord arse that we all know, and we all know and love. And I don't think Anne was too over the moon, shall we say, about being married. It's something that she didn't really want to do. So on this occasion, I think the split was totally amicable. So there we go. And that, in a nutshell, shall I say, sort of rounds up series 3. Like I say, it's the shorter of the 3 series, still brilliantly written and acted and cinematography, but it just left me wanting a little more from it than what we've got. I think it's probably one of the more gorier seasons. A lot more, happening in here, torture-wise and whatever. But for the most part, I think they could have done a lot more with this series than what they did. So that moves us on to series 4. And of course, series 4 takes us on to the tale of 2 Catherines. You have the young Catherine Howard, played by Tamsin Merchant, and you have Catherine Parr, played by the awesome Jolie Richardson. So we see the 4th and final series kicking off with King getting married to his 5th wife, Catherine Howard. Now, she was merely a mere girl, both immature in body and mind, and I think even in Tudor times eyebrows were raised at his choice. I think it was very, very midlife crisis for him yet again, his little head doing all the thinking for him, because she was such a young girl. There's a scene where they are having a banquet and King Henry asked the French ambassador if he knew how old she was, and when he said no, she says she's only 17. Now, I don't know how many people out there that's watched this series get the same thought as I do when he says that bit. I just expect Kip Winger to pop into view, playing his lute, singing, "She's only 17, Daddy says she's too young, but she's old enough for me." I don't know, could just be me, but I always get that in my head in that song, on that part anyway. But at 17, like I say, she was a mere girl. And it wasn't too long before she'd caught the eye of the King's groom, Thomas Culpeper, where she started having an affair with him, and so began this very, very dangerous love triangle. Now, Thomas Culpeper is played absolutely brilliantly by Torrance Coombs. You'll be hissing and booing at him like a pantomime villain from the very off, because basically he's a shit. He really is a piece of work. But like I say, he plays a very, very dangerous game, starting to have an affair with the King's wife. I think he just, again, his head was definitely doing all the thinking there. Of course, we've got all the intrigue and plotting behind there with ladies in waiting and whispering and whatever. Now, Catherine's uncle, he was sort of trying to get on the social ladder. He was one of these that looked at all the people in court as new men. He hated them because his family, generations before, they'd always been in the upper echelons of court, so he felt he had a right to be amongst all of it. But again, he was a bit of a dick himself. He did manage to get himself made Knight of the Garter, and it was just, he was one of these that got the privileges and just abused the privileges that he was given. So, he tried everything he could do to be in the King's favour, even going over to France on a really ill-advised war with France. It cost a lot of English lives, a lot of money, and it was only through, I think, through sheer luck that King Henry came out on top with that. Of course, in all this time, he found out about Catherine's infidelity with Thomas Culpeper, and it was off to the chopping block for those two as well. Only got themselves to blame, I should imagine, but it is a bit of a hard watch seeing Catherine go to the executioner's block, because she didn't really know what she was getting herself in for. She knew how to manipulate men, but I don't think she knew the extremity of what situation she got herself into. But there you go. So that leaves Henry open to look for wife number 6, and he sets his sight on Catherine Parr, who is a lot older than what Catherine Howard was. The thing is, she's already married, and she wants absolutely nothing to do with it. Of course, fate plays into Henry's hands. Her husband dies, which leaves her a widower, so she reluctantly, I think on the most part, agrees to become Henry's 6th and last wife. She wouldn't have known she was last wife. But of course, she's a very, very headstrong woman. King Henry was very much used to having his own way, but she knew when to bite back, but she also knew when to keep quiet. And I think she did very well to steer the choppy waters of life, living with Henry VIII. And of course, she went on to survive him. If you think of the little rhyme, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Remember that little ditty, and you know what happened in what order. So yeah, she eventually did outlive Henry. There is, on the last episode, a scene when Anne Boleyn comes back to him in sort of like a dream ghost sequence. A bit stylized for me, or that. I don't think it was completely necessary. Another little quibble I have got, at this stage of his life, King Henry was huge. I think he had something like a 52-inch waist, something like that. He was huge, but Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, as much as you're trying to get the clothing to make him look bigger, I don't think he pulls it off at all. He still looks, I think he looks far too trim. There is, of course, the scene near the end of the series as well, where he's got the painter doing the famous portrait of him. The first draft of it he hates, because he was actually painted how he looked, but he wanted it for him to look, every inch to fit young man that he used to. So the version that you see hung up is very, very stylized. I say a lot more in this final series than what there was in series 3. Again, there are inaccuracies and omissions, but like I say, it's an entertainment program. It's not a documentary, so you do have to play a bit fast and loose with the truth and events, just to make it an entertaining program at the end of the day. But the very final episode tells you what happens after Henry dies. And of course, as well, with this box set, you do get a bonus disc. It goes behind the scenes, how they make the costumes and everything. And also there's a few segments with Natalie Dormer going around like Tower of London, Hampton Court, where she's looking at some of the actual dresses that the Queens wore, and there's a lot of history in that, and that is fascinating watch as well worth it. So there we go. That's the Tudor box set complete series as 1, 2, 3 and 4. So there we have it, the complete box set of the series, The Tudors. Now, absolutely love this, like I said, but it is full of historical inaccuracies. A lot is omitted from the story as well, but because it's a TV series and they've got to make it entertaining, this is going to happen. You're not going to get the full warts and all. There's a lot of things I say they could have added in, but they didn't. They've played a bit footloose with the facts as well, as we mentioned earlier in the video. But that doesn't take away from what an absolutely awesome television series and retelling of the story of King Henry VIII this really is. I can't recommend it highly enough. Unfortunately, because of the historical inaccuracies, and I'm a bit of a history buff myself, I am going to knock off half a point because of that, but for no other reason than that. So with all that in mind, I'm going to give the Tudors 4.5 evil Ednas. And that's the end of yet another episode. I hope you all enjoyed that one. If you did, and you haven't done so already, could you please remember to subscribe to my channel. At the moment, I'm aiming to get 1,000 subscribers, and as soon as I hit that 1,000th subscriber mark, I will donate at least £20 to Macmillan nurses here in the UK. For those of you living outside of the UK and you don't know who the Macmillan nurses are, they are there to help everyone with cancer live life as fully as they can, providing physical, financial and emotional support. I myself have had their services firsthand and I can tell you they are exceptional. A lot of the time they do have to rely on public donations, so if you'd like to find out more about Macmillan nurses, or in fact give a little donation yourself, then please visit www.macmillan.org.uk. Okay, I'd like to thank you all again for watching. It's very much appreciated. Don't forget, you can still follow me on Facebook and on Twitter if that's going to be easy for you. And here's to seeing you all again on the next episode of the Adrian Bow Project.